Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we say is that you are not a free thinker if you auto dismiss ideas. We have a right to think for ourselves. Always. So if you like the kind of work we do here, please support our work on redpillreligion.com. Yes, give us a like and a subscribe and hit that bell here on YouTube. But we're on our third channel because, we keep getting chased around. In days of social media censorship, remember you can hit us always on redpillreligion.com. By the way, we could use your financial support. Please do hit that PayPal tip jar. Join us on Patreon, Subscribestar, Bitcoin, or buy some of our sweet merchandise. We got artwork, we got coffee mugs, we got t-shirts, we got early good reports on those shirts too, by the way. So check it all out on the right sidebar of redpillreligion.com. Find us on Gab, especially find us on Dissenter. Look for Red Pill Religion there. We're also on MeWe and other social media networks, so come look for us. We're happy to hear from you. Now, today, we are pleased to bring on board Ewan Jones, a sociologist for the UK, from the UK. Say hi. Good morning, Ewan.
Good morning. How's it going?
All right, excellent. Now, when we look at your channel, which I only discovered a few months ago, actually, I'm going to read the description you put of your own channel. It says, "Hello, my name is Ewan Jones. Welcome to my channel. First and foremost, I'm a sociologist. I like to take a top-down view of society to consider the laws, policies, structures, and ideas that work, and the laws, policies, and structures and ideas that don't work. I'm against the tyrannical ideologies that help to increase the size and power of the corporation of government. They include socialism, communism, imperialism, postmodernism, and globalism. And I stand for the ideologies that empower the people. They are traditionalism, nationalism, and libertarianism. On this channel, I will investigate these issues and talk about them with other free thinkers." All right, that's quite a mouthful, Evan. Ewan, I'm sorry, for whatever reason, my brain keeps calling you Evan.
Right, it's okay.
I don't know why it does that, Ewan. But anyway, well, first off, what got you interested in the field of sociology?
I've been interested in it for a long time, and probably when I started as a student, because I'm a mental health nurse, and I started working as a student, and I
Oh, wait a minute, you're a nurse as well. You're a nurse as well as a sociologist. That's interesting.
Yes, so that's what I do as a job, and this sociology thing is really, it's my hobby. So I'm not a university qualified sociologist. I don't have I don't have any university qualifications within this subject. However, I'm very interested in it, and to be honest, I found the university system extremely stagnant when I was in it, when I was studying mental health nursing. And generally, I've been anti-establishment for a long time. And yeah, really, I mean, initially I became anti-establishment and anti the mainstream media probably back in around 2010, when I saw the treatment that Julian Assange was receiving from them. And I saw the way he was treated by the media, and I kind of thought about what he had actually done. And I thought it was extremely useful what he had done in revealing all of this information. But he was public enemy number one. And then, a week after he released all of these documents about the US military, he was also being accused of being a rapist. And so my immediate thought was the entire media are full of crap. And so really, I started becoming more anti-establishment from there, and anti-mainstream media from there. And so I started, I think one of the first major kind of anti-establishment documentaries I watched was the Zeitgeist films. And so
there's a lot of flaws in those films, by the way, I can tell you as a Christian, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't agree with a lot of what was said in the films, but I do actually, I liked a lot of the critique, especially in the third one, Zeitgeist, moving forward, about Western civilization. And especially with you know, it really chimed a chord with me about a lot of the insights they were making around psychopathy, for instance, and you know, criminals and so on, and the entire criminal justice system. So
Which is
from
rather
there,
criminal, yes.
yeah. So basically, from there, I just became more and more of a watcher of YouTube. And I guess over the years, what we've seen is that a whole bunch of YouTube anti-establishment movements have they've sprung up, and I've investigated a lot of them. And from doing that, and also from I go to Speaker's Corner regularly as well, and that's in London, and it's a free speech zone there. It's in Hyde Park Corner, and you can go there and you can talk about anything you want. People do, and I've learnt a lot from going to there over the last few years as well.
The Speaker's Corner, if I could mention, is something a lot of Americans don't even know about. We pride ourselves on our free speech here, which isn't as free as we people think. But I mean, many would say the home of free speech is actually England, or the UK generally, but England in particular, and that the tradition starts there at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. Is that? And I know it's still alive today. Apparently, you can still go down to Speaker's Corner and blather whatever you want. Is that pretty much still the tradition there?
Yes, it's every Sunday, and it's a pretty good turnout. It's better in the summer than it is in the winter. It's around, I guess, at peak times you get around 1,000 people there at most, maybe 1,200. Whereas in the past, unfortunately, compared to now, a lot more people in the past would go there, and so you had some occasions where you get 10, 20,000 people there. And so it's fallen by the wayside a little bit since then. And yeah, I think, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think that there's obviously a huge problem with free speech right now, and this is right across the West. It's in the USA, it's in the UK, it's in Canada, it's everywhere. And there's a huge crackdown on free speech, and there's this almost this kind of dogged insistence that people need to listen to the mainstream media. And there's this constant fight against people who promote alternative views outside of that. And these people are demonized and castigated, and yeah, it's a real problem.
Yeah, one of the things I will go ahead and repeat my reservations about Zeitgeist in particular. Anybody wants to know what issues I have with it, let me know. At the same time, though, we're not here to debate that, and I think it keys to an overall other point. I think a lot of people are calling it the Great Awakening. A lot of people are calling it a bunch of other things. But alternative media of all sorts, you know, some of which may be questionable, some of which may not be, or some of which may be questionable, some of which may be true, is springing up everywhere. Because I think at this point, just about everybody sees the mainstream press, especially the global press, the globally recognizable press, whether it's the New York Times or the Guardian or the Daily Mail, or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, or pick your not even English language, you know, Der Spiegel or whatever. It's all very controlled, and I don't know how anybody can trust what they see, like anything in the mainstream media. Like if the BBC tells me what the score is of a football match, I probably will believe them, but I might double check. If you understand what I mean. We're in like this information free fall zone where nobody knows what's true anymore, and it's very terrifying once you come to grips with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I'd agree, definitely.
All right, well, let's go ahead. And so I totally encourage people to be investigating other things, even things I don't agree with. Like I said about free thinking, we've been sold a song and dance about free thinking. Well, free thinking means you should be free to question any reigning point of view in any establishment figure, any idea, whether you want to question. I mean, really, free thinking means I can question the Big Bang Theory, I can question evolution, I can question whether or not the government's telling me the truth, I can question whether there are, in fact, real conspiracies going on. we should be free to do all of that. And that doesn't mean you credulously believe anything you see either. We've got to all keep our own, our own skepticism on, and keep a rational skepticism of everything and everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Let's turn to a few of your favorite videos, because you recommended a few as good choices. They're linked in the low bar. They'll be linked on redpillreligion.com. Let's talk a little bit about this video you did called The Pillars of Western Civilization. It's about an hour long, almost 53 minutes. So we're not going to do it. But what were you trying to do in this video, and what were you trying to accomplish, or what did you accomplish?
So my idea for generally my sociological approach has morphed over time, and I think it's become a lot better than what it was initially, especially a few years ago. And I was much more of a left-wing believer back then, and that was how I was raised. And it was through hearing a lot of the narratives when I was in school from my parents, from the mainstream media. But my focus now is it's a solution focus. I think one of the problems that we see in sociology is that it's the problem of data, and the fact that there's an infinite amount of it. And there's also, I'd say there's a massive issue with statistical analysis. And I think a lot of people who work within this field, and people generally, I think there's way too much of a promotion of this idea that statistical analysis is going to provide us with answers within this field. And I think, actually this is rubbish. And what we do need an ideological approach, but for me, it's about having the correct ideological approach. And so I promote 5 specific ideologies. They are traditionalism, nationalism, libertarianism, the Enlightenment, and morality. And I believe we have promoted these ideologies in the past. And as a result of doing this, we have created civilizations that have survived and prospered for a long period of time. And so in the video, I talk about these 5 ideologies and really about Western civilization and how it has embraced these specific ideologies, and how in doing so, it came to achieve the level of success that it had. And I look at
these ideologies being what you call nationalism, traditionalism, and what?
The Enlightenment, libertarianism, and morality.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my big 5 that I promote. And yeah, this is my view on sociology has changed over time, but I believe that this is it's certainly the best model that I know about. And I think that if any society adopts a pure version of each of these ideologies, then it will do well. And so basically, if we look at it in the context of Western civilization, what we see is generally, in terms of having any civilization, I think that traditionalism is the backbone of the civilization. So a civilization is able to, it embraces traditionalism, and basically in the past, most civilizations have used religion as a way of promoting traditionalism amongst the populace. And so let's look at the church, and in Christianity and Judaism. What we see is that the church is a way, basically, so that the local community can exist and can survive over a long period of time. And so if we look at the building itself, it brings the local community together. You have the alpha male figure there, the priest, the father. He provides basically he provides moral guidance to his flock. He tries to ensure that they do well in their lives, because he is a figure who's in front of them, he is accountable to them, you know, and if he tells them some bad advice, then it's on his head, you know, and
on
so
his head, and you can go over his head to a bishop or whatever. Yes, yeah,
exactly, yes, yeah, and I think that's one of the differences, you know, between now and say medieval Europe or medieval times in the UK, is that we've now moved over to this reliance on the mainstream media, and so they've now elected themselves as the knowers of truth and as our moral guides and as, you know, the new fathers, the new priests, and all of this is, I mean, it's completely disingenuous, and all of the advice I'd say that we've been given by the mainstream media really ever since the beginning of this organization, this you know, mass collectivist media, I'd say all of it has pretty much been rubbish. And the problem is that you have a situation where you have one person who is talking into a wireless system, or one person who is in a TV studio, and they're giving out their advice to everyone in the country, everyone in the nation. And there's not that level of accountability that exists in, you know, that existed before in the system where that we had of with religion, where you had the priest and he was talking to his flock, because then in that situation there is accountability and he is trying to help them, and also if he fails, then that failure is on his head, because he has to live with the consequences of his failure, and so do the rest of the community. And I'd say what's happened now as well in the West, certainly, is really a lot of people have stopped going to church. And so we are seeing the failure of the local community. And I think it's a really bad thing that has happened, because now people aren't, that, you know, they're not meeting with their neighbours and with the other people who live nearby to them, with
everybody's,
you know, close family members and all of that, and people are becoming more and more atomized, and yeah, I think it's just a terrible failure. So yes, yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm going to recommend a couple of books to you and your audience, because you said something that strikes deep to my heart. This is a classic book called How to Lie with Statistics by Darrell Huff. It was written more than, like in the 1950s it was published, but it's just as valid today. And it's a short, easy read. Anybody who gets bamboozled by statistics owes it to himself to read this little book. It's actually as good as a semester or two of statistics study in terms of practical value. Because you just mentioned how we've used statistics to try to do everything, under the idea that statistics is science, and we're going to use scientific rationalism to figure out everything. And the problem is if you really study statistics, it can be a science, but the reality is you can, as the saying goes, if you torture numbers long enough, they'll admit to anything. And you can, the book goes into all the ways, not only how to do sound statistics, but how you can lie your butt off all the time to use statistics to get whatever answer you want. I always tell people, they'll be totally, no matter who put the statistic out or where it came from, be skeptical, ask what the assumptions they're working under for their statistics and all that. But speaking of which, since you've touched on the religion issue, and I
just like to expand on that and say that basically, sure, I feel the problem with statistics is that if you take, you know, this idea and apply it to the subject of sociology, I think it's hugely problematic, because they don't give you any solutions as to how you should actually run your society. And I think if we do look back at the you know, our history of mythological tales and all of the religious texts and so on, what we see is that there's a massive amount of depth concerning these questions of what is the best way to run your life from a philosophical perspective, and also what is the best way to try and run your society from a sociological perspective. And so I feel that the best way into this to actually construct the subject of sociology is to look at it certainly through history and the consideration of which societies have succeeded and which ones have failed and why that happened, but also to look at the underlying ideology that each of these societies used and how those ideologies either lead to success or to failure. And I think statistics does none of that. You know, it's just numbers, and it's like, yeah, there's no answers here. You know, and I think that there is this problem that some people seem to have this belief that there's actual answers within the numbers, and I don't think that's the case at all.
So when you say traditionalism, then you would I be correct in suggesting that what your position would be, that if not necessarily becoming religious, at least learning what was the wisdom from, this ancient cultural heritage, at least learning to respect it and learn from it.
Yes, if I may, I think it's the basically my theory on this is that so for all of our evolution as human beings and as earlier hominids, is that basically we're a small collective species. We congregate into a local community, and it seems around 150 members is the ideal tribe size, and that was the case for all of our development. And so I'd say what religion has done from look in terms of looking back at the evolution of humanity and earlier hominids, I say what religion does is it actually emulates the conditions that led to the success of our species when we were, as our earlier ancestors. And I think, this is what we have achieved effectively through religion, is it promotes the small community, the gathering together of around 150 people, close families and who are close to their neighbours, strong bonds between the local community, and guidance from the alpha male figure who is the priest or the father, and also marriage and pair bonding. And so that ensures that young couples are married off, and that once they're married, they have children, and then those children, there's an onus on the community to ensure they are raised well, and the parenting isn't just done by the two parents; it's done by the whole community.
Well, and grandmothers and grandfathers and aunts and uncles and close family members. Yes.
Yes, yeah, and I think religion is the vessel through which all of that has been achieved, and this has been the case right through, ever since the dawn of complex human civilization. And I think this is the ideology of traditionalism that has been promoted by religions right across the world. And I would say that it's the Christianity and Judaism of all the religions. I believe those two have promoted the best iteration of the ideology of traditionalism.
Interesting way of putting it. So even from a sociologist perspective, you're seeing a lot of this value to religion. I'm actually going to then go off script then and recommend to you and your audience an interesting book called The Triumph of Faith: Why the World is More Religious Than Ever. This book is by a sociology professor at the University of California at Berkeley. So actually traditionally very left-wing, even according to American standards. But what Professor Stark and a number of other researchers have done is shown through extensive, rigorous analysis that while we've been told that the UK, for example, or Western Europe in general, is highly secularized, atheistic, and not religious anymore, that appears not to be true at all, even in your own country, as much as you might think it is true. I'm not saying what you think. Dr. Stark does a detailed analysis, and like, for example, in the UK, He can tell you that religious observance in the United Kingdom right now is about as high as it was during the medieval and Middle Ages. And in fact, the number of believers in the UK has not gone down in any significant way in the last
Is
few
that on a
decades.
per capita basis? I assume it would have to be.
No, well, as on a per capita basis, as well as in raw numbers, your country's as religious as it's ever been. What's happened is that the established churches, which receive subsidy from the state and such, have emptied the pews. But what's actually happening statistically is that religious believers are as common as they ever were. There's a social stigma about talking about it. But they're staying at home, or they're going to little evangelical churches, or they're reviving some kind of paganism. Some kind of ancestral paganism like Judaism. Some are getting into occultism and things like that. But in reality, your country is as religious as it was 50 or 100 or 500 years ago. And this is true all across Europe. And one of the things that is happening is that religion is growing, not shrinking. The established churches are doing very poorly, but little independent stuff is popping up all over the place. The Muslims are growing, the Sikhs are growing. The only part of the population that's not is the atheist population, which is shrinking.
Yes,
fact,
I mean that's a massive conversation on its own. But, yes,
it is. Well, I recommend looking at the book. It's at least provocative. And one of the things I've found is that I've talked to more than one Brit who's convinced his country's not very religious, and then I say, go look around because you've got a social stigma. Start asking around, and you're going to find out the number of religious people is actually quite a bit higher than you think it is. So it is worth looking into just as a sociological observation.
I would say that yeah, basically I think there is this I mean I'd say that there is this issue that atheism and agnosticism have become more popular recently, and I feel that in some ways this isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, I feel my angle is that actually the problem is that even though people have decided they don't believe in a god or in a cosmic overmind, the problem is they've given up on all of the artifices of religion. So that would be the promotion of, or basically the ideology of traditionalism and the local community, and the actual the importance of the institution of marriage as something that's taken seriously, because as we've clearly seen, because of feminism and its grip on the family court system, for instance, and also this kind of descent into liberal values that we've had. I'd say that we've had this turning away from the ideology of traditionalism, and as a result, all of the values are being thrown out the window, and it's just a really terrible thing, I'd say, that we're seeing now, in terms of just all of those values being cast aside. And so I mean, like, I've had this talk with because I am an atheist myself, and I've had this talk with people who are religious in the past, and basically the question they've asked me is, do you think that you can build an atheist system that promotes traditionalism and does so in a way that will ensure the survival of a particular group of people over a long period of time? And I'm like, I believe it could be done with an absolute focus on the truth, on why traditionalism is important. So I think that it is possible for atheist people to build something in terms of traditionalism that I think can work, and I think they need to. And I would say one of the other things that I've noticed actually is amongst some, I'd say, yeah, some religious people, mainly Christians, and that is their own descent into liberal values.
Oh,
and
for sure.
Yeah, so even though they're going to church and they have the belief in God, I think the problem is they are actually turning away from traditionalism, and all of the components of their faith that actually worked and that actually ensured the long-term survival of your particular society. So I've just noticed this from talking to religious people recently that they're kind of promoting Tinder and hookup culture, and you're seeing like some marriages and some children, but not I mean, this isn't ubiquitous, and I think there's a problem there. So yeah, I just I guess. But I suppose, I mean, if I just like to get your thoughts on that before moving on, possibly.
I would, yeah, that's a good point, and we're here to just concentrate on that. I think that I would again commend you to Dr. Stark's work. I'll even Amazon loan it to you if I can. But it is fascinating because what you said is true. Quite a few Christians have embraced modernist values and modernist relativism and all that. The only thing I would say is quite a few have not, and there's a growing rebellion against that in Christian ranks, not just in the United States, but I know for a fact in the UK. One of the things that it appears to be absolutely true on the religion topic is that there's a certain bottom that religion never goes below. That is, no matter how unpopular religion goes, whether it's Christianity or certain other religions, there's a bottom floor where they'll never go below a certain number. This is why in China they can't get rid of Christianity or Buddhism or Falun Gong as much as they try. This religion, when you resist it, just tends to get more powerful. It goes underground. So I think you'll find, if you look into it, that actually the UK is a far more religious place than most people think, because there's a sort of social stigma about being openly religious there. Although, again, we're seeing the rise of paganry and all that. I think you've got a real good point here, which is that Christians who have forgotten their own values and have embraced all this new modernity are, again, part of the fall of that. But I do think what I've said is true. People streaming out of the establishment churches and going to private worship and things like that is very, very, very common. Sometimes even secretive, but it's common in your own country and all across Western Europe. So you're probably going to see a development of that and religiosity going up. In fact, I've got numbers on this somewhere. Actually, we can tell that religion is still a potent force in the UK because an analysis of voting patterns of those who voted for the Brexit showed that believing Christians and Sikhs and others were the groups most likely to vote for the Brexit. So whether you were for the Brexit or not, it was actually religious voters who put you over the top. Your media doesn't talk about that, but that happened, which does indicate that regardless of where you're at religiously, this is still a potent force in your politics, and it is worth knowing that that is happening. And I do think that atheists or agnostics or people who aren't very religious, I think if they learn to have a respect for the religious values and religious ideas that formed over centuries and really thousands of years, will be helpful to at least learn from the past and learn what worked and why not, and why did people have certain attitudes, and was it all just they were terrified of the priests who could send them to hell or whatever? No, there was a reason these old traditions worked.
I absolutely agree with you on that one. I think it's a great point, and I would say that really in the last, certainly it's got worse in the last 10 years, isn't it? But for a while now we've had I'd say it's the cultural Marxist, the radical left, and there's been a massive war on Christianity and a constant demonization of everything it does. And I've spoken about it a few times at Speaker's Corner, and there's always a leftist who comes up and it like instantly talks about all of these paedophile priests and so on. And it's like, really? So you're saying like every single priest was a paedophile within Christianity, and that the entire institution of Christianity achieved nothing positive for all of these millions of people across Europe for the last 2,000 years.
Oh yes, we invented slavery. We invented pedophilia. We invented rape. No, the only a thing I would point out there is that anybody, as someone who was a sex abuse victim himself, not of a priest, but at the hands of a government school teacher and his police officer wife and his good buddy, the pedo, who worked at the bus stations. I'm not that moved when they attack, our priests, although obviously that's a problem. If you look at what's going on in the secular government systems with going after little boys, teachers going after little boys and girls, it's a travesty. Just going after the religious people for that is hypocrisy, because it says you don't actually care about the issue, because really what's going on in the US and UK in the government-run schools is a travesty in that regard. So don't think that your public school teacher, just because she's a nice lady, is any less dangerous than a priest in that regard. Moving on a little bit from the religion issue, I want to talk about one or two more of your videos before we go on. I was particularly caught with this video on the feminization of the workplace. I did work opposing, I'm in a movie called The Red Pill by Cassie J, which I recommend people.
Great movie.
It's a very good movie, yes. And I'm in that movie. You'll find me there. And all the information in it is valid, even though I don't necessarily, all the persons in it don't, they're not all great people, but the movie is powerful. And I did work years against feminism, and I came to the conclusion that feminism does its business ultimately by talking about equality, but it winds up bullying men and bullying women into something they don't want to be. And it's an ideology that people don't feel they're allowed to criticize or reject, but in fact, most people don't like it. What did you find in this? It's about a 40-minute documentary interviewing people about the feminization of the workplace.
So in this video, I speak to my friend Rod, and we've both had experience of basically of the feminization of the workplace, and this has had a negative impact on both of our lives. I work as a mental health nurse, and this industry has been fully feminized. And Rod, he used to work as a designer for, I think he was designing toys, and some of them were being used in shop fronts. And so it was quite a feminized industry for him. And he was bullied out of his job. Whereas for me, it's the... I'd say in my industry, there's been a complete failure, and this has been particularly acute in the last 10 years. And what's happened is that this industry is actually quite a masculine job, because we have to deal with crazy people, people who aren't seeing things straight, people who are extremely emotional. And quite often we have to deal with aggressive men. And, so we have to restrain them. We have to put them into seclusion. And these are the people who we have to work with. And what has happened, because the entire industry is absolutely dominated by women. There's a mass of female nurses, and also now female psychologists, and females from a whole bunch of other professions. And they are dominating the industry. And they are using this way of thinking, this particular mindset that does not work in that situation, because, especially not when you're dealing with aggressive men. And I've been in some job situations where, for instance, basically it's an aggressive male who is running the wards. They're running the shift. The staff are terrified of him, and they're not controlling the situation. They're not able to cope. They're not managing, and absolutely nothing productive is being done. And instead, the client is causing complete chaos on the wards, and the whole situation is degenerating for them and all of the other clients who are on the wards. And it's just become a massive sinking ship. And this has happened because we have promoted this idea that it's okay to, or that it's a good idea to have this industry being completely dominated by women who are using this female mindset of promoting empathy, diplomacy, unconditional positive regard. And they are, a lot of the time unable to actually work positively during restraints, and are unable to actually stand up to these aggressive men. And I think it's absolutely obvious that we need to bring back masculinity into this job. We need to bring back men who can actually deal with the situation in front of them. Bring back that level of disposability that exists if you're a man and you go out into the chaos of nature and you have to face off against a lion or something. And that attitude of like, I am disposable, but I am going to triumph. I'm going to win in this situation. And that attitude has just been taken away out of the industry, and the whole thing has collapsed as a result. And I'd say this is happening in a lot of government-controlled industries, that they are becoming feminized, and we are seeing this feminine way of working is being promoted that doesn't actually work and doesn't actually achieve any positive benefits whatsoever. So yeah, I'd like to get your response to that.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and although I think I agree with everything you just said. Although there's another half of it that's worth discussing. You're absolutely right that the feminization of the so-called helping professions, whether it's nursing, mental health, or whatever it is, has had a deleterious effect on men as well as women. To go to the men's side, while you mentioned the certain more, I don't know, brutal sounding aspects of males like disposability, I do sometimes challenge my fellow men's advocates as like, don't get too caught up on that word disposability. You're the ones who are the men's are the ones who are the risk takers. But the men's are the ones who get the rewards for that kind of risk-taking behavior too. And men aren't just disposable. A society that loses most of its men is going to collapse straight up. Sure. And women and children without a man are going to become wards of the state almost by default if they don't have a man. So we can't just dispose our men folk. And I think a lot of young men especially hear that term male disposability and they internalize it and like realize, no, as a man, you have something to offer and you are valuable. And you are desired, and your willingness to take risks doesn't necessarily mean you're going to just go pop off and do things and you get you killed routinely. You're the guy who takes the risks, and you're the one with the bravery. And when it comes to treating men in psychology, I've talked to other psychologists just like this about this who've looked at it. What the feminization and the feminism and its ideology have done to psychology is that we have pathologized normal behavior. A man, when he gets, for example, women tend to follow a pattern that we might call tend and befriend. When they're upset, when they're in crisis, when they're confused, what they want to do more than anything else is get together like in a group and talk to each other face to face and talk out their feelings. And even what they're saying, they themselves know may not always be rational, but they're going to cry, they're going to get the emotions out, they're going to process their emotions by talking and consoling each other. They don't even want advice. If you give them advice, you're offending them. That's just kind of the way the female mind works when they're dealing with mental crisis. The problem is if you treat a man like that, most males, there are exceptions, but most males are completely unresponsive to that and made more uncomfortable by it. Men generally don't emote by sitting there face to face, crying or whatever, and discussing their feelings. What men frequently need, first off, sometimes a man needs literally to be left alone for a while. I mean, you can't let him, if he's in distress mentally, you can't just completely leave him. If he's not coming out of his room for a week, maybe you need to go out there and get him. But you need to respect a man's need for space and for silence and for his ability to, his right to not talk about it while he is still processing whatever grief, anguish, frustration he's dealt with. Furthermore, what a man usually needs, although he does need to talk, a man will most effectively usually work through his pain, his grief, his confusion if you give him a project to work on with other men. Because men work side by side, and men need that feeling that they're accomplishing something. That, like, if they've lost a loved one, they want to honor the loss by building something in their memory. They want to work on a project to feel that they have built something positive for the future for themselves or others. That is just a very identifiable male need when he's traumatized. He needs to feel a sense of accomplishment. And yes, if he gets angry, he needs, I mean, it's the basic fight, flight, or freeze thing. A man, he may need to flee and retreat from the world. He may need to just be afraid. He may need to weep. And by the way, if he needs to weep, he should be weeping in front of his male friends, because the dirty secret is most women are repulsed by a crying man. But other men will actually put up with it better with one of their buddies is crying. These are things that it's really important to know. And even anger. Sometimes a man needs, like, if you don't let him just say ah and go, punch a wall, perhaps, or just go for a walk where he's jumping around and angry and run bastards. Let him get that out, and then let him come back and calm down. You don't shame him for it. And yet the system tends to do that. Oh my God, he's gotten violent. Let's sit him down. Let's drug him up. Let's get his toxic masculinity under control. Or he's a danger to us all. Whether as some really calm blokes.
I just like to interject there. I think one of the problems is that we have a situation, whereas I mean in the past there was, I'd say, by the staff members. I mean, I'd say it's a healthy attitude, because it was one of control, where the male clients or patients, they knew the rules, and they knew that if they kicked off, then they would end up being secluded and possibly having an injection. And so they knew that they were controlled in that situation. And so I think what you have then is basically a lot more peace on the wards. And I think we had that in the past, but now we've feminized the industry massively, and we've promoted, we've brought loads of psychologists in, and we bring out their input all the time. And these are people who've never actually been involved in a restraint, and so they've never actually had to deal with an aggressive male. And so with them, it's all, I think, from what I've seen, it's all just kind of classroom social justice attitudes, and this often a belief that you can always sort out a situation through de-escalation, through just talking to someone nicely. And there's this new policy they brought out in UK mental health services. It's called Safe Wards. And the central idea is that you just need to be nice to all of the patients, and you need to say nice words to them, and you need to smile, and you shouldn't say the word no, because the word no is negative, and that might cause them to become angry and aggressive. And what I'm seeing is all of this is a complete lack of the staff being able to set any kind of positive boundaries or any level of constitution that they might otherwise have within the job. And all of that is just going by the wayside. And instead, I'd say what has emerged is, staff teams full of, a lot of the time, it's full of women who are not actually controlling the situation. And it's the feminine, they're basically wildly out of control. And so for me, that's the major problem, and it's kind of it's a security problem, and I'd say we're seeing this now, and it's this it's this inability that I'd say that it's a lot of women have actually in dangerous job situations, and I think that's it's been brought to the fore by this movement of feminism and its obsession that anything a man can do, women can do better. But otherwise, I just like to also address your point that I thought what you said otherwise was pretty much the truth, that men do absolutely have a different way of dealing with pain than women, and it's we don't deal with problems by talking to other people in a group situation. And instead, yes, it's, sometimes you just need to give him time. But also, I think men have probably more of an attachment to actually engage in activities as a way of improving themselves and as a way of dealing with trauma as well.
Yes, they feel like they're building something, they're accomplishing something. That's just a sort of an innate drive men need. If they feel they can accomplish nothing, if they feel nothing they do works, if they feel they've got no plan to do anything to make their situation better, they will go into meltdown. This is even why things like occupational therapy are wise. Even if he's just building a birdhouse, he feels like he's doing something. And this really helps a lot of men. And what I would say there is that you're describing two problems. A, the fact that psychology, we treat it like a science, but it's not most of the time. And psychologists give these airy theories that sound good, but do they actually work in application? What you described there about how they handle an angry man, in fact, a lot of those strategies you just described are very passive aggressive and female and are going to work on women better, because a lot of men are going to interpret everything you just said about how they diffuse him as condescending and controlling and confusing, and it's going to make them more frustrated and not help them quite a bit of the time. And I think it's worth knowing that, and it's a problem because really, let's say a guy's raging, and he's even pretty close to out of control, and he's hitting the wall, and he's just smashed a chair or whatever it is. The women will tend to freak out about that, but a couple of guys who just approach him unthreateningly and say, "Hey, mate, how you doing? Oh, yeah, I'd be mad at that too. Yeah, I understand why you're angry. Think, man, I get it. Can we calm down maybe a little bit, brother?" Men can do that if they recognize that that's instinctive male behavior, because the male who's acting out is feeling nothing but powerless. Typically, when he's acting like that, he's angry and he's afraid, and he feels completely powerless and like he can do nothing to control his situation. And that's what's most frequent in my experience. And yeah, just having other males who are like, "Hey, man, we get it. Fuck that chair. I understand why you're mad." He's going to be more likely to calm down, and your female nurses probably have a hard time with that, or even understanding that that's what's going on. So, I mean, I think we would agree that we agree broadly that the mental health services in the United States, especially if they're influenced by feminism or are almost a completely female-dominated web space, they may actually make that gentleman worse in the long run, because they're not talking about him right. Or talking to him right, or just respecting his male way of doing things and not calling it toxic masculinity and treating him like he's dangerous just because he's getting angry and yelly or whatever it is. I would also say that part of what the analysis that you gave there that I would add to is that what I find is that in feminist-dominated workplaces, including mental health, is they're blind to abusive and even violent behavior by females, and don't take that kind of behavior seriously, because when females are violent, it also expresses rather differently. And a lot of feminism seems to be based on basically telling a violent woman with a temper problem, or an abusive woman with a temper problem, or a psychotic woman with a problem, that really she's a victim of men somewhere along the line, and that's the way she is the way she is. And it's pure poison to that woman, who's not going to get better if she's being enabled in her own dysfunctional behavior. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I'd say there's an interesting client group actually, and I'd say this is a problem overall definitely with the feminization of all of these industries, and this especially applies in my industry, mental health, and also in social services as well. But I'd say the problem is there's this promotion of victimization and victimhood, and like it's just a lot of patients who come through the system who are given this snake oil of victimhood or victimization, and I mean, I see this so clearly in mental health services, in the eating disorder units, for instance, and it's mainly female clients who, who are struggling to eat, who have anorexia, and there's a this staggering ethos that is fed into the staff teams that you can't. You basically need to walk on eggshells in every single conversation you have with the patients. And I'm not saying that people should be completely obnoxious in that situation, but I think it's fine to be to talk in a realistic way, and to talk to other staff, for instance, as you would, or to the patients there as you would to anyone else. And but no, there's this it's this focus on a lot of microaggressions, and the idea that if you as a staff member say a comment which could be construed in a certain way by one of the patients as meaning that you think that they're fat, or you think that they aren't doing so well, then you're to blame for that. And basically, you need to walk on eggshells around all of these women because they are Fabergé eggs. And that's the attitude I get a lot from when I've worked with these services. And I just think it's utterly ridiculous because these women who go through the service, they're going to then go out into the real world.
Yeah.
And the people out there aren't going to treat them like they're Fabergé eggs.
No.
They're going to treat them like they're normal human beings, and they're going to be bitchy and aggressive and all of everything you're used to on a day-to-day basis. And we're not actually preparing these clients for that real life experience that they're going to face, and we're victimizing them. We're turning them into these kind of crippled individuals who can't cope with anything. And so I'd say that there has been this, and that's just one example. There are millions others I could give, examples of how we are victimizing these clients, and we're not promoting self-reliance amongst them. And I mean, that's personally, right. In my, recently on YouTube, I've been following a lot of the work by Jordan Peterson and also Jocko Willink as well. And I think with these two chaps, what they're promoting is complete accountability and complete self-reliance. And I think it's a very positive trait, actually. And it's one that a feminized society has completely thrown out of the window, which is this attitude that you can actually cope in your life and you can actually achieve amazing things, but you might need to toughen up in order to do it. But that's okay. You can do it. Just lead a disciplined existence, and and actually work on trying to better yourself, and you'll be able to do it. And I mean, it seems that we've just got rid of this type of mentality from I'd say all of these feminized industries, and instead we're just promoting this worldview which is obsessed with victimhood.
Yes, I agree, and we've got to wrap in the next 5 or 10 minutes or so.
Sure.
So I'll just add the comment that I agree with all that, and part of what you're talking about there is feminist ideology, which needs to go. All these concepts, Duluth model, toxic masculinity, all of that needs to go. Some of that is feminist ideology, and some of it is just the unfortunate effects of female domination in general, because while females obviously bring great gifts to subjects like mental health and can be very gifted at it, they don't have the complete package, especially just because, and men don't have the complete package normally, but they both bring something to addressing these things. And when you're female dominated, you're not getting that male perspective. Even the words you're saying, to be honest, are very masculine. Females tend to be highly centered around comfort and getting along and group cohesion. And frankly, sometimes you need the stubborn male who's just going to sit there and say, no, you're wrong. No, this is not what we're doing. No, no, No. That's almost like a paternalist thing, patriarchal if you want, but it's something that men bring to the table too. That, no, you know, I don't care how unpopular, I don't care if you don't like me. What I'm saying is true. That kind of attitude is a very masculine attitude. Like, really, I don't care if any of you like me. I don't care if you like me. You're wrong. It sounds wrong, but sometimes that's exactly the pushback a person needs to hear to make them go and really think. It's what fathers do for their children. And you know, that's the only last politically incorrect comment I'll make on that. Let's get to one more of your videos, and let's start to wrap this up. You did another one that well represents your work, called Political Tribalism. Another subject of about 40 minutes. What I will say is that I think there's a modern tendency, and you can react to this, there is a modern tendency to say that tribalism is a bad thing and that our woes are caused by tribalism. And even if you look at this from an evolutionary biology perspective, let alone let's say a traditional religious one, that is insanity. It is obvious that people naturally develop tribes and want tribes. And when you try to take it away from them, I think they go insane. So I think, and you'll give me your opinion, we need to embrace tribalism. We just need to be analyzing what is a healthy tribalism and a respectful tribalism, and that works. But what do you think?
Yes, I basically my belief is that I think there's this problem with representative democracy and also with a lot of people who just listen or watch the mainstream media, and then this kind of belief that if they are, you know, if they're on the left, if they're with the globalists, then they vote the correct way and they'll be sorted out in their social circles. And when they're trying to climb the public sector job ladder, for instance, and you know, and it seems that there's the other side who are the conservative side, and with that element of political tribalism, I'd say there's almost the promotion of complete individualism, and from there, my point is that actually, you know, I believe that the solution to this issue that we have now with the whole of you know, Western society, I don't have a hopeful outlook for it in the next 20 years. I see things getting really, really bad, to be honest, and so I feel that the solution is to focus on the subject of sociology, and I then give my, you know, my belief within sociology, which is that you know, I think the best way forward is to promote the 5 ideologies that I do. The Enlightenment, where you view the underlying truth of the world as being the most important thing there is. And, you know, in every field of human endeavor, our mission is to try and find the underlying truth.
Well,
and also, so I'll just finish this off. Also, you know, with nationalism, my belief that there are individual nation states around the world, and they need to be reliant and to sort themselves out and to ensure that their cultures survive over a long period of time. And with traditionalism, it's the same concept, but it exists at a local level. So that's individual communities ensuring that they survive over thousands of years and that they do well for all of their members. And also on top of that, I'd say there's the capitalist system, and, you know, that ensures that there's trade between people right across the country, and you know, that there is a free market and it's healthy and bustling. And my final belief, which is that all of this, you know, you have morality as the kind of the overarching glue, you know, over all of these other ideologies, that at all points you are trying to do good. And so generally that was my my talk in this particular video, is that you know, the problem is that the political tribal system, it gets away from the value of the Enlightenment, and it's that one value really that actually helped us to build the modern world. And what we're seeing now is this mass degeneration, because people don't really care about the truth anymore. All they care about is being part of the biggest tribe, the biggest gang, you know, the biggest political gang. And I believe it's that type of thinking where you don't consider the truth. You know, that is extremely harmful. But yeah, I'd say, you know, in terms of my full approach, I do promote all of the 5 ideologies, and I think they're all pretty important. So yes, that's my statement on that one.
Well, the only area where we might have a disagreement here, and it could be its own show, so I'll just mention it, and maybe we'll do it again sometime, or spark further conversations. There are a number of us, not just me, who have real doubts about some of what a lot of us call the mythology of the Enlightenment and problems inherent in Enlightenment thinking, that which is not to say there's nothing of value in there, but that it's been oversold and overrated, and that there are other ways of looking at the world besides so-called Enlightenment thinking. But let's leave that aside, because certainly where we would definitely agree is there were definite value among some of the Enlightenment thinkers, and that surrender of truth, or what Christians, advanced Christians, might call, you know, dedication to what's called the logos. Dedication to the truth, first and foremost, gets led by the wayside when we indulge in an unhealthy tribalism. That said, I would have to say that, you know, what I started with is true. Even if I go into a totally atheistic evolutionary biology state of mind, it is very clear that we're made to be in tribes. Of some sorts. It is a natural occurrence. As somebody who has no tribal affiliation per se is basically going to be a sociopath in some sense, because, as you just said, within our minds, we know humans, like, we can only make about 150 intimate connections before it starts breaking. And that means that 150 people or so that are central to our lives are going to form who we are. And if they've nothing in common with each other, you're going to be having a schizophrenic existence at the very least. So, I mean, I do think that tribalism is natural in humans, cannot be taken out of them, would be abused to try to take it out of them. And instead, the focus should be more like, well, how do you get into a healthy, functional tribe that's going to work for you?
I'd agree, definitely, yes. Yeah.
That would be my only issue there. I think we otherwise agree on quite a lot. Well, listen, Ewan, this has been, I almost called you Evan again. I don't know why I do that. Ewan, this has been a genuine pleasure. I'm going to encourage everybody to please go and subscribe to Ewan Jones's channel, which is easy to find, Ewan Jones, where he talks about these issues quite frequently. And otherwise, do check him out. Tonight, we're going to be having on by Bay McFarland, where we'll talk about the problems inherent in what's called no-fault divorce in the United States, and how that is actually a human rights violation. And we're here every night. Please be sure to check out the fantastic interview we did last night with E. Michael Jones on the Jewish revolutionary spirit. We're here every day. So please check us out on redpillreligion.com. Hit that tip jar. We could use your support. Please find us on all the relevant social media, Facebook and all that, although we're especially pushing Dissenter and MeWe and Gab and Minds, because these are more independent platforms than what we're seeing on things like Twitter and Facebook and all those. So in any case, give us a like, give us a subscribe, hit that notification bell, tell your friends or enemies, go subscribe to Ewan Jones, and God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. That was great.